Well, then that next year, 1993, the Waco siege.
The Waco siege, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a year later.
A year later. So David Koresh, who considered himself Jesus, had this compound.
Yes.
With lots of people, many of which were his wives and a bunch of kids and families and so forth. And they were piling up tons and tons of guns.
Again, kind of going back to the same thing. The Christian identity movement, the white supremacists, the domestic terrorism, that was the framework of newscasts at the time. Remember, legacy media was big then. Yeah, the networks, there was no internet, there was no Google, it was a very, very different world in terms of information. And many of the stories people saw on the news day to day with these groups, somehow, a year after Ruby Ridge, that's kind of the way history works. I've been part of so many of these conspiracies in my life. It's crazy. So many. We haven't even got started with some of these. But we had just started to get past the Ruby Ridge thing, the investigations, the grand jury. We were starting to move forward as an organization, this hostage rescue team. At the same time, most of what we did was overseas. A lot of the stuff that we did was classified. We were doing terrorist organizations in foreign countries, and we still got Ruby Ridge. So if you work on the hostage rescue team, at the time, you would have peripheral responsibilities. One of mine was a climber, because if you got to break into a skyscraper at 4 o'clock in the morning and get the bad guys, somebody's got to climb the skyscraper. I was one of those guys. It was one of my side jobs. So we had a climbing team, right? So the climbing team was in Tucson, Arizona. We were climbing some cliffs there, and we went to lunch. At the time, we had beepers because, it's pre-cell phone. And I remember the beeper going off. Somebody called the office and they said, go to Waco, Texas. We got a situation. And everybody said the same thing. Where's Waco? What the hell's going on? So we fly into Waco, and here we go on another story that at the time seemed like a Tuesday, and now we're talking about it like it's folklore.
Well, yeah, I guess that the FBI was planning to go into the compound and grab the guns. And David Koresh was tipped off.
Okay, we're going to start over again. This is what happens 30 years after the fact. It's how things get turned around, right? I'm not changing responsibility, but we got to look at the facts. The facts were that just as the Marshal Service decided they wanted to get involved in Randy Weaver's business, for whatever reason, I'm not commenting on that. For whatever reason, the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, decided they wanted to do something very, very similar with a guy who had a house out in a field with a group called the Branch Davidians, and they were not sawing off a shotgun. They were buying hand grenades, fully automatic weapon sears. They were creating what people at the time believed to be an arsenal of what they interpreted to be illegal weapons. Mm-hmm. I think it was a UPS driver or something, a mailman. So the ATF office in Waco, Texas, decided they were going to go out and they were going to do a search warrant on the compound. In order to do that, because of the weapons, I think they believed they wanted to be safe, so they put together a SWAT team type organization, special operations group, and they went out in a truck with a cattle carrier, and they went up to the house to try to execute a search warrant. When they did, a hellacious gunfight breaks out. Thousands of rounds, and we've seen it play out on TV.
Yeah.
That's what started. When they got shot up, the ATF team got shot up, again, the government goes, well, who are we going to send in to figure the situation out? We were it. The hostage rescue team for the FBI was the last backstop. It was there was nobody behind us. I mean, there was nothing else. So that's why we got that gig again. So I flew from Tucson at Waco. The team came in from Quantico. We all got together. We went out. We secured the compound. And 51 days later, it all went to hell.
Right. So you show up because at that point, David Koresh's followers barricaded themselves into, inside this huge house filled with weapons.
Yes.
Some agents actually tried to breach the house and ended up getting shot on the roof.
Day one, those were all ATF agents.
Oh, those are ATF agents?
All ATF.
Okay, because you guys show up, now FBI gets involved.
Yes.
And this goes on for 51 days.
Count them. 51 days.
51 days. Well, David Koresh gets shot at one point.
He got shot twice, but yeah.
Got shot twice.
Yeah.
Now, you actually had him in your crosshairs.
Yes.
But you didn't kill him.
I did not kill him, no.
Right. You had to think about that?
No, I mean, maybe I should have killed him, but
Why didn't you kill him?
So a buddy of mine, a guy named Tiller Russell, directed a piece for Netflix called Waco, American Apocalypse. He
Yeah,
got
I
four
saw it.
people to. Okay, so I was that
Yeah.
guy. I was the sniper,
Yeah.
and I talk about it at great length to Tiller, but only tiny clips make the show, right? So I talked about it in great depth. But the problem, the thing is this: what people need to understand is when you have a crime scene, you have to secure the crime scene. When the crime scene is a shootout, like everybody saw on TV between the ATF and the Branch Davidians, you had federal agents, 6 federal agents, and you had a hellscape of a gunfight. You have dead people inside the building, you have dead people outside the building, you have wounded people inside the building, and you had something like 90 or 100 what we considered as hostages. They were women and children, some of them men, who were not engaged in the gunfight. So you've got to contain the crime scene so they don't run away and they get away with murder and, basic law enforcement stuff. So we were the team that built a perimeter around the house. Then the negotiators came in and started trying to resolve the thing peacefully, which is what you always want to do. But if things broke bad, you need an armed, violence-capable, I suppose, way of looking at it, entity that could protect against further violence, and that was us. So we set up this perimeter for 51 days, and on the 51st day, that's what everybody knows about Waco. What look like tanks go in and inject the tear gas, the fire, the tragedy that unfolded. That was me. One of my responsibilities was to provide surveillance on the building as a sniper. So I have a spotting scope, I have a rifle scope, and I would watch the building because we would do things like you'd do frequency analysis because they did the same thing. They would have shifts. So we'd know who had guns, we'd know where the guns are, we'd know when they're moving, we'd know what they were doing. And part of my shift one night was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was watching the building when he came to the window. And that's what you're asking me about.
Why did you take the shot?
Because you don't arbitrarily get to take a shot and kill somebody under those circumstances. In civilian law enforcement. Military, yes. Not in civilian law enforcement. So my thinking, the hesitation when you asked me that question, the hesitation is this, Vlad. If your job is resolution of violent situations and you are the backstop, the last backstop, it takes a lot to get to that point. Testing, psychological testing, endless testing, and selection as you move through all these processes. You need the skills, but you also need the decision-making capability. You just can't run in a building and kill everybody. You've got to kill the bad guys to save the good guys, but it's much more complex than that. The decision-making is much more complex than that. So when a person gets to the point, I was at that time, sitting behind sandbags, looking across that field, and he came to the window. I don't, in that moment, get to decide if he's going to live or if he's going to die. What you interpret as hesitation is this, that if I had shot him, 86 people would have lived. Maybe. Because you cut the head off the snake and everybody goes home.
Yeah, because after the dust settled, 82 Branch Davidians were dead and 4 federal agents were dead.
Yeah, I'm not sure those are the exact numbers, but close, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, technically, David Koresh was holding them hostage because
Yes.
he was agreeing to come out, then he would change his mind, then he would the next day, okay, give me 2 more days. No, never mind. I'll send a hostage out. No, I'm not going to. And this went on until finally the tanks went in with the tear gas and the fire broke out. And that's sort of the controversy here did the fire break out because the tanks or did they set their own fire?
I'll just say this, and I think I probably decided I was not going to talk about this when I came in to talk to you because my life this is a tiny thing in a very large life.
Yeah.
But I'll say this because you asked.
Yes.
And I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. So I'll say this, that you don't know unless you watch Waco American Apocalypse or read what I wrote about it also in that first book in great detail about what happened, when it happened, how it happened, who it happened to, and whatever. The details matter. You can't talk about something this controversial 30 years after the fact in broad scope. You can't coarse grain this thing. You've got to look at it in detail. And details include this. We started that operation at 6 or 7 in the morning, probably 6 o'clock in the morning. And the people inside that building fired so many rounds at us that when the team went in to analyze the burned remains of the building, they had to weigh the spent casings. They had to weigh them. They couldn't count them. We're talking tens of thousands of rounds. So when you watch TV about the tanks going into the buildings, we were just getting hosed. I've been in a lot of war in my life. I've never been in a situation where we were just completely hosed by people that we could not shoot back at. We never fired a round. So that time when you see the fire break out, the 6 hours leading up to that fire were far, far more involved than people realized they were. And the fire broke out. This also has been examined in excruciating detail, well-warranted detail, but excruciating detail by so many organizations over the years. Private groups, civil suits, media, law enforcement, and it is conclusively proven now. And I don't think anybody even argues anymore that they lit the fire. I don't think there's any.
Yeah. And they found over 300 guns.
300 guns, yeah.
Yeah, 300 guns.
And millions, not thousands, millions of rounds of ammunition.
Millions of rounds.
And hand grenades. They had hand grenades and they threw hand grenades.
Well, right, because David Koresh felt he was Jesus and that Babylon was going to come, take him over. So when ATF showed up, he was like, see, I told you, they're here. Let's do what we prepared for.
Yes.
And that's what happened. Now, what's interesting is that some years later, when you talk about like the white supremacist movement and so forth, Timothy McVeigh, who was also in support of these types of movements, actually blew up the federal building as revenge for Waco, Texas.
Yeah, in broad strokes, that's true, yes.
Yeah.
He was at Waco. He was...
Oh, exactly. Yeah. He was outside.
There.
Yeah. He was
like
watching it. Yeah.
They had a bunch of people selling T-shirts and stuff outside. But, I mean, it was an entire community. There was a media community. There was a law enforcement community. I mean, we stayed at the Holiday Inn or like Howard Johnson's, and we go get our gear together and put camouflage and go out, whatever. It was a lifestyle. It was 2 months that we lived there. But I want to point out one story about Waco before we move on. I've been back to Waco 3 times. I've been back to the Branch Davidian compound as it is now. And the first time I went back fairly soon after. And I sat down with the preacher, the pastor of the church, which has been built in the ruins of what was the compound, what was the building.
Oh.
There's now a church there.
Okay.
In the ashes of what was.
That's interesting.
Right. And there are some houses, people still live out there, trailer houses. The organization itself has not changed locations. Well, they've expanded, but they're still there. So I went out and I sat down and he said, listen, Whitcomb, I got to tell you something. He said, this would have happened. You should never feel badly about this. This was going to happen whether you were here or not. And I asked him what he meant. And he said he had been a competitor of David Koresh leading up to that siege. David Koresh got the church. He didn't. He came back after the fact and took over the church. And he said that David Koresh, long before anybody ever heard of Waco, said, this is the way it's going to go. It's going to end in a fiery apocalypse with the federal government. And he laid the whole thing out. And somehow it happened. Fate, who knows? Government negligence, who knows? David Koresh being a butcher of 86 people, who knows? It's way too much to talk about that right now. But I will say that there was a certain inevitability in the way a guy named Vernon Howell decided to live his life, and he became David Koresh. And he alone decided to kill the people in that building. Was I there? Was I part of the mechanism? Yes. Will I talk about this till the day I die? Yes. Was it something that I never thought people would talk about this 2 or 3 years later. But here we talk about it 30 years later and people still have an interest. So